Hey guys, we're looking here at working the division point, and we have a nice basic question that can kind of work us through that formula. What is the point that divides line segment DC, there's the symbol for line segment, into a ratio of 1 to 3 starting from point D? Now the first thing I'm going to point out to you, they're really kind here telling us where to start. They could sometimes not even do that, and they'll expect you to know that you should start with point D because it comes first in the line segment over here. But you're always looking for that starting point. That's really important because your starting point is always going to be your point 1. Really, really important. So this must be x1, y1. It absolutely has to be because that's where we're beginning. This is x2, y2. It's where we're going. This is the only rule where the starting position really matters. So pay attention to that. Now I'm going to write out the crazy formula here because bear with me. It's x1 plus a over b times x2 minus x1. Close that bracket off. And then a big comma. And then we repeat the pattern for y. So y1 plus a over b, which is just a fraction, times y2 minus y1. Excuse me. So we're looking for a point at the end of the day that's going to break this line segment up. Now it's breaking it up into a ratio of 1 to 3. And in our rule, what we want is a fraction. So in the last video, you learned a trick for changing a ratio into a fraction. A ratio compares the number of parts equal parts traveled versus remaining. So just to show you visually what that looks like, altogether you can see there are 4 parts here, right? I've traveled 1 part, I got 3 parts to go, and all those parts are equal. So roughly, if I divide this thing into 4 parts, you can see part, and I'm leaving from D. What that means is I've kind of traveled 1 part, and I've got these 3 parts to go. Now, if you think of that as the 1 and you think of that as the 3, visually that's what's going on. All you really need to know for the rule is that we need to change that ratio into a fraction that we can work with, and that's really easy. We take that first number and we put it on top of the fraction. So the 1 to 3 will transform into 1 over 1 plus 3. On the bottom, you just add them up, which is 1/4. And if you come back and you look at this, it kind of makes sense, right? 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts, 4 parts, there they are, and I've traveled 1/4. I've divided it in a ratio of 1 to 3, but I've traveled 1/4. I want the fraction in my equation. And once I've got that, this is really easy to do. I've got my starting position, and I've got my fraction. And now I can go ahead and calculate. So x1 is 156 plus my fraction, 1 over 4, times x2, negative 120, minus x1, 156. Comma. I'm going to write in the y. We could simplify this one first. I'm just going to write down the y in one shot just so we can see the whole thing laid out, and then we'll solve everything. And you can do that in any order you prefer. y1. So y1, we'll come back to my point 1. There's my x1. There's my y1. Right? Y1 is negative 64. Plus that fraction, which we know is 1/4. Y2 minus y1, 83, minus negative 64. Be careful with that minus negative 64. Don't get fooled when we do that. So I'm going to focus on the left-hand side here first. I'm going to go ahead and solve my x. And the way to do that always is to simplify the brackets first. Then we do this multiplication here. And then we're going to add it to the 156. So let's do the brackets first. I'll bring my calculator in for this one. Get that in a nice spot there. Okay, hopefully we can see that well. So I'm going to simplify the brackets. Negative 120 minus 156. I'm going to hit my equals. I'm going to write this number down. Copy out everything exactly the same. 156 plus 1 over 4 times negative 276. Close the brackets. Put that comma and I'll deal with the y's later. So now this part's really simple, but be careful, right? We don't want to go 156 plus 1 and then divide the thing by 4 and then multiply by negative 276, because order of operations will change your answer. We need to respect the order of operations or BEDMAS. This over here is a multiplication and this over here is division. The order of these three doesn't really matter, but I know that most of you are burning to get rid of that fraction. So I'll do that right now. 1 divided by 4 is equal to 0.25. So we know that that right there is a quarter, 0.25. And we have to do this multiplication next. So I'm just going to do this whole thing in one step. 1 divided by 4 times that answer by negative 276. It equals, that's negative 69. I'm going to do that one more time. I want you to see what I did. 1 divided by 4 equals that decimal times negative 276. And there it is, negative 69. So 156, I'm just going to move a little bit, plus negative 69. So that's an easy one to do. 156 plus negative 69 is 87. So that's the x component of that point right there is an 87. Still need the y. So come back, do the same thing. Remember my y1, my fraction, my y2 minus y1. Watch that double negative. We're going to simplify inside the brackets first. So we're going to go 83 minus negative 64, which is going to give me a positive 147. I always like to write that number down. 1 over 4 times 147. And now, you don't do this addition yet. Remember, order of operations, we're going to take care of that first. And I know a lot of you hate that fraction, so here we go. 1 divided by 4 is going to equal that. There's your division. I'm going to multiply that by 147. And that gives me the 36.75. So now I'll take a second to write that down. Negative 64 plus, we got a number for that part right there as 36.75. And now I can do this last step. Negative 64 plus 36.75, and that's going to come to negative 27.25. And that's the y component of this point over here, negative 27.25. So that point right there divides this whole line segment in a ratio of 1 part to 3 parts, or basically travels from point D 1/4 of the way to point C. That's how you do the division point.